So please welcome Aura Nadrich to the show. Welcome, Aura.
Hi, Ashley. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome, all the way from Los Angeles, California. I I found you. I'm sure I always wonder because the minute I heard you, I'm like, oh, I want to ask her to be on my show. And it's then I went down Instagram and then I started your I have your new book and I got your Audible book, Live True. So you've been in my ear, you've been in my eyes, my mind,
Thank you.
for the last week or so. And, when I learned this podcast is really, uh, the growth that I've experienced. I can't even explain. I mean, it's just amazing. If I look back, it's like writing a book every episode. And I can tell people had been messaging me saying, oh, Ashley, I went back and listened to your, other episodes and you've grown so much. And I'm like, oh, I don't think I could go back and listen to that. But it's just this evolution. And when I started learning about you, first of all, you're brave. And I think when was watching and then look back at your books, where you were even before 2020, like where it all began. Um, you were you wanted to make a difference. You wanted to help people see life through like this pureness of eyes but when and get rid of these limiting beliefs and live in this present moment. And I'm all about present moment. And I was just thinking about you when I was walking this morning because I was listening to you, and it was all about the present moment, and it really made me realize how much I live in the present moment. And I am out there looking at the birds and the trees, but listening to your voice and explaining the importance of that elevated the importance it is. I mean, it even takes it to the next level for me now in my life. So you've made a lot of impacts, but that is one of them. What I was thinking is, I think, I look at the title of this podcast is Uncover Your Magic. And that was just an inspired thought one day when I had to find a title. But as I've grown, it's always fun to find, I kind of look for when you uncovered your magic. And I look back at kind of the way when your sister passed away. I feel like that was like kind of something that was a kind of made you pivot. Would you say that? Can we start there maybe? Or you tell me, because that was just my
Yeah,
reflection.
that really is exactly when my life changed for sure, without question. And thank you for being so perceptive and kind of going straight to the moment when my life changed so drastically. Yeah, I mean, I had an older sister, Esther, who was like the greatest older sister you could have, one of two older sisters. And she was just this extraordinary person. All my girlfriends would come over and they just would want to like be stare at her. She was absolutely stunningly beautiful and had this incredible spirit about her. And she was a lot more fearless than I was in a lot of ways. I was sort of in awe of the fact that she was this like fearless person. She just would go after whatever she wanted. And she was older than me, so I was younger and I didn't maybe have the same maturity that she had. And so here was this older sister of mine that seemed like the perfect it girl. There were so many people that, I'd be places. I was an actress for 10 years. There would be actors and famous people that knew of my sister, and they'd be like, oh my God, your sister, your sister, your sister.
Oh,
And so she was this extraordinary being. And unfortunately, she had what was called at the time a nervous breakdown, a psychotic break. What we've come to know about her, because they don't really know. For some people, there might be some underlying conditions that someone might have, whether it's a pre-existing depression or whatever. She was with a guy that was giving her drugs, and I think that that's what pushed her over the edge. And so she had a mental breakdown, and she was never the same again. And I was beyond devastated. I mean, I was the youngest of four. It was really hard for me to wrap my head around, like, here was this sister of mine who I loved beyond words, who seemed so perfect to me one day, and then the next day she was never the same. So it was extremely tragic. It was also really frightening to me. I mean, for anybody who's had any kind of crises in a family knows what that's like, whether you've lost a family member or a family member has succumbed to something like mental illness or addiction. It just permeates out wide and far within the family. So it took me on a very long psychospiritual journey, because I fast forward, I became an actress, and I was in the in the movie world for 10 years, and I had suffered from anxiety and I didn't know why, and it was getting in the way. I had this wonderful career that was taking off. So long story short, I was suffering and I didn't know that it was so connected to her illness. And it took me on a very deep psychospiritual journey, and I learned so much about myself. I learned about the workings of the mind. Little did I know I was being prepared to do the very work that I'm doing today.
Right.
So it really was that. She changed my life for sure. And I would not be doing what I'm doing today. I don't think I certainly wouldn't have written my first book, Says Who, which is based on what I went through, with her illness, had it not been through what she had gone through. So yeah, it changed my life for sure.
Right. When you say you wrote Says Who, because I was looking at that, and that is the questions you ask yourself when you have a negative thought. So you were going through that, like you were looking at your sister. It was like you were like seeing what you saw in her and you.
Well, really what the big aha moment for me with my sister specifically, and how I got to write Says Who, is that because I was suffering with anxiety, and for anybody who really understands the workings of Says Who, because I created something called the Says Who method, which is a cognitive method for transforming negative and fear-based thoughts. It came from my own experience, because when my sister had her breakdown, I went into tremendous fear. It's very scary to see a family member, especially because how it manifested in her was manic depression, and then she got diagnosed with schizophrenia, and it was scary. I was young. I was 15. I think I just turned 15 years old.
Oh, wow.
It was really frightening to see that happen. And so when it happened to her, I got so scared that the thought that popped up into my head, even though I wasn't conscious of it at the time, was, oh my God, if this can happen to her, it can happen to me. That's the
Right.
thought that I had. So what I did is I buried that thought. And because so much of the focus, and you're a parent.
Right.
Yes. So, when you have a child in crises, my parents were focused on my sister because she was in terrible crises. They weren't focused on that I was traumatized by what had happened to her. So I have this thought, oh my God, she's suddenly gone crazy. What if that happens to me? It's like the boogeyman in the monster in your closet. So I buried it to survive. And then fast forward 10 years later, when I got into the film industry, I started suffering from anxiety, not knowing that what was causing me anxiety is that I was pushing this thought down constantly, like, you're going to go crazy like your sister. You're going to go crazy like your sister. What happened to your sister is going to happen to you. That was based on nothing but fear.
Right.
There's no empirical proof. No, medical professional authority had told me, oh, well, your sister had a breakdown because she was, she had been given drugs and she maybe had a fragile psyche. And so guess what? The same thing's going to happen to you. Nobody told me. So that was really what the book is about. The book is about overcoming a fear-based thought. And I created the Says Who method because thoughts are what can destroy your life, and a fear-based thought can be something that holds you hostage to fear for your entire life. So this book really was born from that, so that I created this what's called the Says Who method, to help so many people, that I thought, wow, if I could help people not suffer the way I suffered, then
Mhm.
I will have done my job. And
Right.
that's what got me to write the book.
Huh, but in your acting, you were starting to write screenplay, like you were writing um
I was a
script.
writer. I've been a writer since, excuse me, since I was even a little girl. I was writing poetry, and my poetry would get voted as best poetry in elementary school. So there was always the writer in me. I then went to acting school and became a classically trained actress, got into episodic TV and commercials, and my career took off so fast. I wasn't even really prepared. Like,
Oh,
poof, it happened really quickly. And I had this underlying situation that I was unaware of. Do you know? So I did sell a script when I was acting. I was like 23 years
hmm.
old. I became part of a writing program and I sold a script, and that was huge. And there was always the writer in me. It was always like, oh, the writer in me, the writer in me. But I had 10 great years of being in the acting area of it until I decided writing was a thing that I wanted to commit myself to.
But that first book, like because I'm thinking of it as, gosh, that's one of my things. I really have that on the forefront of my mind is to write a book. But when you are, I know you're a writer, I get that. But are you just coming up with, it's just like, are you channeling it? Have you done your research? Like, are you just creating this?
Asked me that. That is so funny that you're asking me about that, but especially with this most recent book, Time to Awaken. I was interviewed and someone said, "Did you channel that book?"
Oh, right. I
I don't
wouldn't have asked you that with the time to
know.
wake.
I don't sit down and channel books, and I even write a lot about in my book, Mindfulness and Mysticism. I even have a whole chapter on the creative process. And I really love the whole creative process and how one can access creativity. I think anybody really could write a book if they put their focus. You don't have to be like this bona fide writer to be able to write a book. You just have to be open and connected to your creativity. So, no, I mean, like once I became in mindfulness, I really started to get into the whole mindfulness field, and I got certified as a mindfulness meditation practitioner. And so I wrote Says Who, which was really the book devoted to this cognitive method that I created. Then, once I became a mindfulness practitioner, my books became very mindfulness based. And so I started writing books in the mindfulness milieu, and books that I didn't see other mindfulness authors writing about. Like I would take mindfulness and I would plug it into like Live True, that's mindfulness and the authentic self. Mindfulness and mysticism, that's mindfulness plugged into the creative mystical experience. So I saw, and Live True got voted as one of the top 100 mindfulness books of all time. I saw that I was taking mindfulness work in an area that I didn't see other mindfulness authors and practitioners taking the mindfulness conversation into. So I have to be inspired to write a book. Usually books come to me and I'll say like, oh, I'm interested in this subject, so I'm going to write a book about it. I've never not written a book that hasn't taken me over.
Right.
And, I think it's part of my own journey of discovery.
Right. Because it's very much, you've said mindfulness many times since we've been on this show, describe to people what you define mindfulness as.
Well, mindfulness is, first of all, it's an inherent quality that we all have. Let's just start with that. Even though it's a practice that goes back 2,500 years, whether it's connected to the lineage of Buddhism or Hinduism or even Christianity and Judaism, it's contemplative. It's a contemplative practice. And when you really sort of bring it to its most, purest essence, it's the practice. And when I say it's an inherent quality, what I mean by that is everybody has the ability to be mindful. And what does mindful connote? Mindful connotes being thoughtful, being present, being aware, so that's really the tenets of mindfulness. When you bring it into a contemplative practice, it's the practice of being in the present moment with total awareness. And meditation is really the formal practice of mindfulness. Mindfulness is the informal practice of meditation. I think it's the most valuable. I taught meditation for many, many years. It's not that difficult to sit on a meditation pillow or a yoga mat, even though some people might say, well, I don't think it's that easy. It's easier to put aside a half an hour or 45 minutes to meditate. It's a lot harder to take the tenets of mindful awareness and bring it into the outside daily life that you live. That's the greatest challenge. So once I started to learn about that, I became certified as a mindfulness practitioner. I was like, wow, that's where the work really happens. Like, that's really where it is, that's why I became very devoted to sharing the practice of mindfulness with others. I taught workshops and did courses in it and clearly write books about it. So to answer your question, mindfulness is really the practice of being in the present moment with total awareness. Gee, that sounds so easy, right? It's one of the hardest things for people to do because a study out of Harvard cites that our mind wanders over 50% of the time. And our mind usually is either lamenting the past or begrudging our past somehow. Like, oh, I wish I had done that. And why didn't this happen? And if only that didn't happen. Well, the past is come and gone. Or we're anticipating the future, which isn't here yet. And we're thinking about what might or could happen. And where we have the hardest time being is in the present moment. And those are the richest moments of our lives, is
Right.
being present, as you just said earlier. So I knew, wow, this is really important stuff. This is really valuable to our lives. And I think that it's really the cause of a lot of problems, is that people aren't present and they're not fully aware. They're not even fully awake, if you really
Right.
want to get to the nitty gritty of the
Right.
problems. So that's the work that I feel very passionate about. I've been doing it for, over 20 years now, and I'm as passionate about it today as I've ever been.
Yes. You talk about sleepwalkers. I was thinking about people that I help, I really do focus on when you were in my ear this morning and what you were just saying, um, I really do practice that. I mean, I'm in the car driving, present moment. I'm in the, wherever I am. It's an awareness. I have, it's a practice. It becomes a muscle, but you do continue. I practice that with the girls. Their whole life I've practiced, when we were just in Italy, and every moment, look at this moment, like, look where we are. I'm always like, look what, we don't get to do this again. So let's really enjoy it. But I'm very much, that's like my personality. But I know that, and I think being a mother, like I know you are too, you see how quickly childhood goes, and you're like, oh my gosh, I used to be the person at the grocery store where all the people would say that really goes fast. And I'm thinking, okay. And now I'm the one, with these babies going, gosh, it just goes so fast. But I mean, as a mother, especially, when you're watching your children grow and you're like, talk about present moment, that to me, as where I am in my life now, Presley's 14 and Paige is 17. But, it's just, I've been in the moment and I'm so grateful for that. And I feel like when you talk about sleepwalking and the people that, especially will lead up to this, the new book too, but coming into 2020, and I want to go there with the tree that fell. I'm trying to think of all these like moments that you had, these aha moments. But people that it woke me up even more. I started this podcast in 2020 with an inspired thought. It was March before anything. And it was like 2 days later, the girls' school got shut down and I had signed up for this podcast and I didn't know why. And I just went with it. Like, I know you talked too about inspiration and I love that. So you speak my language and that's why it's been so uplifting and so fun to listen to you. But when I think of 2020 and when you start talking and I want to go into this Time to Awaken book, but it was like the spotlight went on all the sleepwalkers. Like, it's like, yeah, I used to know like, oh, she's sleepwalking and, I can, you're aware of the vibration and the energy of people and who's aware and who's not.
Yeah.
But man, did the spotlight go on, and I know you're the one that really saw it, because what I'm feeling from you learning about you is you are so focused on mindfulness and the thoughts in your head, being in the present moment. All of a sudden this 2020 comes and you're like, what? Like people like lose. I'm like, what's going on? The sleepwalkers are still sleepwalking.
Yeah.
Like, so let's go there. Because wasn't there a tree or something?
You really encapsulated it, Ashley. That's exactly. And I think the advantage that I had is because I've been working with mindfulness for so long and it's so about awareness. I mean, it's like that is it. That is what mindfulness is about, being aware. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, 2020, the world turned upside down. And all of this, like our world was not the same when 2020 hit. And so I'm very much a questioner. I'm very much, again, mindful awareness. Okay, what's going on? And does that resonate? Does that ring true? Does that sound right to me? You know, I suddenly saw this incredible, it was like a tsunami was coming. You know, like
Mm.
all of a sudden this tsunami literally hit the globe, and we're all just trying to, by the seat of our pants, trying to figure out like what the hell just happened. And I think the greatest advantage that I had is like, yes, I've always been inquisitive. I've always been a questioner. I've always been an intuitive, somebody who, you know, really pays close attention to things. But what I did see, and I love the way you say the spotlight on the sleepers. Is that what you said?
Sleepwalkers. Well, you call them sleepwalkers.
I do. It's like a type of sleepwalking. And I really do say that. I say, you know, for people to be really conscious, and we're becoming, for those of us that really value being aware and being an awake human being on the planet, you know, you realize that there are just people around you. It could even be people that you know, and they're just not fully there. You know, they're kind of there, or they think they're there, but they're really not. And
Right.
I feel like the last 3 years really shined a light on that, because suddenly everybody sort of had different opinions of what was going on. And
Right.
that was really fascinating to me, that, you know, it's a very challenging thing to suddenly be in the throes of this unprecedented event that I call it what Mickey Willis calls it. I don't know how the viewership of your listeners, I call it a plandemic, like Mickey Willis does.
Right.
There's a lot for us to know, and now's a good time for us to know more. And what's wrong with knowing more? You know, not to be afraid to learn more. So I I just felt like, okay, the world has changed. What do I need to know? What do I need to, what do I need to see? What do I need to find out? And I realized that a lot of people really just don't want to be inconvenienced. They're like, okay, can we just get back to like life, and can we get back to normal? Well, I don't view the world today the way it was
No.
prior to
Right.
2020. It's a very changed world that we're in today. And I value awareness because I feel that it's not just my awareness, it's my awareness affects those around me. And I think, I always say we're much more powerful as a we than a me. And that we're all in this, you know, I didn't like the way that term was used during COVID, like we're all in this together. We're really in this together now. And
Right.
this, when I say we're in this together, I'm talking about a lot of different things. So it behooves each and every one of us to be as aware and as awake as we possibly can be.
Right. When 2020 came, March of whatever, that date, right away, were you like, how did that evolve for you?
You know, it's interesting. I was recently at an event, and I was at this VIP dinner, and the question that was asked around the table was like, what was your aha moment in 2020?
Oh, uh-huh.
Like, what did you kind of like what you're asking me? For me specifically, I also support Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's running for president of the United States. And I was on social media, and he was one of the people that I was following, and he
Mm.
got deplatformed in
Right.
2020. I was like, what is going on? Like, what is this censorship and cancel culture? Like, what just happened? We live in America. Freedom of speech is, you know, one of the most integral parts of our Constitution. Like, I was completely gobsmacked at, I don't understand what just happened. So I would say there were things that felt a little strange to me. There was, because things were moving at such a fast, rapid succession, as you know. It was like suddenly this announcement that this novel virus had hit, and it was, you know, it could kill all of us. So, you know, we all went into this heightened state of fight or flight fear. But my aha moment to when I really started to sort of ask questions really started with that, was when Bobby got he got deplatformed. And I thought, ooh, something very strange is happening. People are being shut up. People are being censored. And as an American, and never in my lifetime have I ever witnessed where, like, if someone has a different opinion or a different narrative, you take them off of social media. And I know so much of Bobby's story about him being vilified and being called an anti-vaxxer and all the things that they propagated about him. Now you can just tune in and listen to him for yourself and form your own opinion. But I knew something wrong, something seriously wrong was going on. Censorship. So I did my first event for Bobby for Children's Health Defense, which was the organization that he had co-founded, which is an incredible organization that helps support, children and, deals with a lot of legal issues to help protect the rights of ourselves and our children. And then there were things that started to play out, like the lockdowns. I call it, we were locked up. There
Yeah.
were a lot of things that started to happen very rapidly. And I thought, Operation Warp Speed, like that name just creeped me out. Like, ooh, what does that even mean? And something warp speed, and then what's going to happen if something is rushed that quickly? So I had a lot of questions, Ashley. It would take an hour for me to tell you all the different questions that I had, but something didn't feel right to me on a deep fundamental level. And it felt like something was coming in to our lives that felt very unnatural to me. And it felt like it was much more than just this novel virus that had come from China. There were just things that didn't make sense. And I wanted answers. I was somebody that I wanted answers. I'm that person. It's like, explain that to me. Don't just tell me something, and just don't keep forcing me to think a certain way when I have genuine questions. And what I really didn't like was how, if you're a questioner, that term conspiracy theorist was thrown in everybody's face. Well, what's wrong with asking questions? I mean, you're a mother, I'm a mother. I would encourage my children to ask questions.
Right.
I wouldn't want my kids to just go along with anything that's presented to them that didn't feel right for them. I, as a mother, feel that that would be the right thing to even teach my own children. So to apply it to me, I thought, wait, we're not supposed to question any of this. We're just supposed to believe everything that is being told to us because it's our authority figures. And by the way, at first it was very jarring because I've never listened to people from the NIH or the World Health Organization, the WHO, or the Center for Disease Control, CDC. In my lifetime, I've never listened to those people before.
Right.
On the news 24/7. So things, just what I call, and what I say in my book, Ashley, is I started to connect the dots. And dots that just were not connecting. And then I was around other people that felt the same way I did. They were like, that doesn't make sense, or I need more information. And why are people being shut up if they're just questioning things? So
right. So tell me, I mean, I think you've said in one of the interviews that this was the easiest book to write, but it's like the most dense.
It's exactly right. You've got that so correct. It was, first of all, I had no intention of writing another book that quickly. I had written Mindfulness and Mysticism with a foreword by the Dalai Lama. I was still really enjoying the accolades of my book being voted as one of the top 100 mindfulness books. And I was doing fine. I was writing all these great mindfulness articles for all the top magazines. Everything was fine. I had no intention of writing a book like this. There was like, if somebody were to tell me I was going to write a book like this, I would have thought, what are you talking about? So what I say is that, it was a confluence of events where a tree fell in my backyard. It was a full moon.
Right.
It was, one could say, I don't want to say it was just because those things happened that I wrote my book, but I woke up one morning and this book came to me so strongly that I say it literally, if it had a voice, it would say, write me now. And I just surrendered to it. And it was not an easy book for me to write. It was actually really, I wrote it over a short period of time, but emotionally it was hard for me to write this book, really, really hard.
Yeah. I mean, and I was going to the back. I mean, you have these references, like, I mean, there's no way of reading it and saying, oh, I don't think she's right.
I had to do a lot of research. I've never
Oh,
written a book like that. It's not like I'm writing a book where there's people that these are the types of books that they write, but I wrote it. And I think that Naomi Wolf, who who I write for Daily Cloud, I'm a columnist on Daily Cloud. I interview on Daily Cloud. She read my book and she's like, wow, I don't know anybody in the wellness field who's written a book from a mindfulness perspective and that's covering these issues. So yeah, it was very dense for sure. It was a very, very dense book. And it was only after, and I had to do all the research because I had to, I couldn't just be writing these things that were based on my own observations. You can check anything that I write in the book and you can see that it's all been researched. And that was a big undertaking for me. I'd never written a book like that before.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. And it's even the name Time to Awaken, that's really, I think that's probably what drew me when I saw that I saw that somewhere. And I thought, when I look at life, and I want to ask you, when we look at these souls that we inhabit in these bodies, right? And we've chosen this time during this, I mean, this was probably one of the hardest decisions. We are the bravest people to come onto this planet at this time. How do
Mhm.
you see like our souls reincarnating to decide? Do you see that as where we decided, this group of 8 billion people on this planet, to come down at this time to move the consciousness to, like, I mean, I would say you for sure, especially writing this book, like something really was like, I don't want to say familiar, but your soul came here to, like, part of your contract is kind of what I feel like that was part of what you came down to do, was really push the, let's go, let's move on. This is the time in history that this all happened for us to awake.
So well said. And I relate to what you say so much. It's really speaking my language. And that's why we're having this conversation today. And that's what's so amazing about this whole journey that we're on, is that those of us that have never met each other before, and we are resonating to something that resonates within our own hearts and souls. And it's connecting us with people all over the world. So yeah, I think to myself, there must be a reason why we are here at this exact moment in time. And what's fascinating about this is that there are those of us, again, that have a deeper understanding about what's going on. And then there are those that maybe it is about the soul's evolution, and that, yes, we're here at this moment in time for a reason. I believe that with every fiber of my being. It's very challenging. It's a very challenging time. It's exciting in a lot of ways because I think that we're at the brink of something very profound. I think it's challenging each and every one of us in ways maybe that we haven't been challenged quite like this before. I've always considered myself very psycho-spiritually oriented. I've always considered myself a spiritual person. But when I look at the times that I'm in right now, I think, boy, this is a major game changer. And when I talk about, even the title of the book, The Great Awakening, that came to me, during the beginning of 2020, is that I kept getting these downloads of, this is a time, this is much more than what appears to be or what we're being told it is. I said, this is the time of a great awakening. And I kept getting this as like a mantra. It kept coming again and again. And I thought, what does that even mean? Like, I think I know what it means, to be awake, but why do I keep saying this is the time of a great awakening? And when I researched that term, the Great Awakening, there have been times throughout history where they were great awakenings, but
Hmm.
they were religious revivals. And they were when religion wasn't working for people. Like, people wanted more. They wanted something else that they themselves maybe didn't even know what it was. So I thought that was really interesting, that there was a time, there's always probably been times throughout history where there have been these very pivotal transformational periods where people were going through something individually and collectively. So I do think there's a reason why we are here. I think this is a time of a great spiritual awakening, and the reason why we're being faced with so much. And sometimes there are days where it's a bit much, it's like, wow, what's happening? is because we're meant to awaken. We're meant to see things. We're meant to know what I call the sacred truths of the universe. I mean, it's for us to know. This is your life journey. This is my life journey. This life journey, I want to know the truth of what I'm doing here and what is this world about. So I do think, if you believe in that, which it sounds like we both do, that yeah, I do feel that there are those of us that are here and have an understanding of what's going on. And then there are those that don't, for whatever reason. That's the mystery for me. Like, I don't know why there are those that are more conscious and more aware, and then there are those that don't even see what we see. And maybe there's a reason for that as well. And time will tell why. We are what I have called in the book, there are those that are awake and those that are asleep. And maybe that's part of the grand design, the divine design of the universe for a reason.
Right. Who do you like, if you were going to get on, buy a book today, who would you buy? Like who do you like read and follow?
Well, I read a lot of not so much current books. I mean, if you looked at my library and if you look at the side of my bed, you'd be like, oh my God, okay, she has more books than I've ever seen. I
Huh.
love books because I love to learn. But the books that I mean, yes, there are books that I'm reading right now that pertain to the times that we're in, that are people that I know, whether it's Naomi Wolf's book, The Bodies of Others, or it's Ed Dowd's book about Cause Unknown, or it's Bobby Kennedy's books, or people that I've interfaced with. But when I think of soul food books that I read, I'll go back to like reading Carl Jung books. I'll read books on philosophy, or I'll read books by Rudolf Steiner, or I'll read books of the great philosophers or people that really wrote about spirituality, because I feel like they knew something in their day that I'm seeing from a modern day perspective today. So I always I'll certainly reach for certain books because I want to know about, what does the Great Reset mean? Okay, let me read about that. But I also, what really does feed my heart and soul is when I have a deeper understanding, a deeper psychospiritual understanding of what's going on and who we are as human beings. So I'll always go back to the classics. I'll always go back to the great philosophers. I mean, I think I was just reading Plato the other day, and I have a book on, Socrates, or a book on emotional intelligence. I've got it all. It's all there.
But you quotes, I mean, that's part of all your books is the quotes that you use. And there was one, I wonder if I saved it on here, this book, but this one, it's your relationships as you awaken. And, that was something that really piqued my interest because, I've looked at my life in the 3-year span, and it's been, the friends kind of disappeared. Some didn't, and it was not a bad thing. It just kind of, they went away.
Mhm.
And I start looking at, we talk a lot on this show, like 3D, 5D, moving from, the third dimension, kind of like, and I look at now kind of third dimension, like sleepwalkers, kind of like, we're moving into this, but we're still living in this body and we're living in the fifth dimension. And I know that that's where I feel like you live,
Mhm.
especially mindfulness ways, right? Like the way we think, the way we are in the present moment, we are viewing life in the fifth dimension. I mean, I live in that place, that my vibration is at that state.
Yeah.
But when you look at relationships as you awaken, and that kind of hit me because that made me really reflect, like I said, on how my life has changed in 3 years, and how, the judgment, it doesn't even, I don't even have judgment because I've really worked through that. You do what you do, right? Like I
It's
don't, doesn't matter to me what you do, but I'm so strong in my belief that I really realized my vibration and my thinking has really risen to that level to where your relationships will either, connect and stay, like the ones, that's kind of why I wanted to know who you read and who you like would, who you attract, who you vibe with. But explain that, what in that chapter, how are you What was your point in relationships to awaken when we awaken?
So as far as relationships are concerned, I mean, like I said, I would go to read, even when I wrote Mindfulness and Mysticism, I was so drawn to mysticism. I read Evelyn Underhill's book on mysticism. She was a Christian mystic that lived in I think, the late 1700s. And I was so drawn to that world of like, what is it to go into that divine sacred place that I experienced even as a little girl, that I thought, oh, there's something much more numinous and much larger than we see on a physical plane. You talk about dimensional perception. Do you know that I always, and it's not religion per se, it's just an understanding of something that is almost ineffable. You can't put it into words, that there is something about us being here. And I quote this a lot. My favorite quote, one of my favorite quotes from Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, the French philosopher mystic, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. So, and he's another one that I will read. There's so many of them that are great. That on this journey, you talk about people that you maybe knew and they're dropping away, and suddenly we're speaking a common language with people that we've never even met before, is really fascinating. And that on the life journey, they're just going to be people that are, if we're moving at a pace where we're evolving exponentially and we're really raising our frequency and our consciousness and want to keep going to see where that takes us, it's not easy to do it with people that are on a more dense vibrational level, because that's just where they're at. Like I agree, I say that a lot. You go do you, and I'll
Right.
do me, and let's just leave each other alone. I think the hardest part is, why are we being constantly bombarded with, people telling us what we should think, what we should believe, and how we should fulfill our destiny, which is a problem that I have with the whole World Economic Forum agenda, or anybody who's got this transhumanist vision of the future, which is not in alignment with what I feel, how I'm supposed to live out my lifetime. So there are people, I mean, I had the good fortune in the beginning because I recently formed a women's group. I had a women's group many, many years ago. And then I thought, oh, what an interesting time to have women come together again to talk about where we're at in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
I was very fortunate because I got on the board of Children's Health Defense. So there were so many great people and women that we were on the same frequency of awareness. When I decided to do the women's group, I thought, oh, I'll have 10 women here. It's fine, whatever. I had 35 women show up at my house.
Wow.
And they were all, I would say 99% were on the same frequency. And some of them were in tears. They were like, I had nobody to talk to over the last 3 years. My own family, my family members, people thought I was crazy. I, could talk about things like what you just said, 3D, 5D, transcendence, higher states of consciousness. That to me is normal talk, for someone else to be like, oh, you're so out there.
Right.
Where's out there? Tell me what's out there, because what's out there to me is being aware of what's going on the planet. So I had all these women come, and I thought, wow, there's really so many more of us than we even know, that all we really do is want to know the truth, and we want to be authentic, and we want to live our life authentically, and we
Right.
want to really go by the truth and be led by the truth. Do you know? So I also know that there are people that I've heard this from a lot of people. I didn't go through this as much as people that I know did. A few people dropped away, but it didn't surprise me, because when I look back to those relationships, I felt like I was always on a much different frequency, even back then. And sometimes you have people in your life that you can say, all right, they're not vibrating on the exact frequency
Right.
that I am. So be it. Not today, not today, when this is such a valuable time and that we have so much more to learn and we are evolving at such a fast pace. I don't think we have a moment to waste, and certainly try to convince somebody of what we know, and they don't want to know it.
Right.
It's just too difficult. And I think it's draining of our energy, if you will. So I know that a lot of people felt polarized and ostracized, and they couldn't get along with family members and whatever medical choices they made, whether to be vaccinated or not vaccinated. It doesn't matter. It's an energy, it's a frequency, and that's what you have to go by. And I think that the people that you're meant to travel this journey with are the people that you're going to know.
Right. I believe that. You talked in a chapter about children, and of course, me with my children, we were deep in what, fifth and eighth grade when this happened. And what sprouted this podcast, it was, it was an inspired thought, and I see it now from, the rear view mirror, but I get it. But at the beginning, Aura, I did a few episodes of just me talking, and I was just talking about my life and my parenting and how important that was. And all of a sudden I had the kids were now in quarantine at home, and I would get these messages from some strangers and some people that I knew. Can you please help my kid? Like, they're struggling. And I'm thinking, help you? It was kind of out of the blue. And I said, sure. I've taught my girls mindset tools their entire life. The books they've read, the Four Agreements, the Untethered Soul. I mean, all the things that I've put into their little, I've computer, programmed to them, but they were flourishing. Okay. But I was reading in that. So and now I have classes for teens and parents. So it's just all evolved into this beautiful. And when I look back at when I asked you, like, how do you see yourself and your soul coming in? It's like I was 51 that year. And I remember thinking, there's always those years of, like, you turn 30, there's certain years of your life where you kind of have that shift.
Mhm.
And that's one of them. And I remember thinking back, now looking back, I was that, and I've always loved to help and teach. And, I've always been the one that had at the bookstore with all the books and going to the seminars and, any kind of thing I could learn. But now it like ignited me into helping these kids and these parents who are sleepwalking, and
Yeah.
that have sleptwalked throughout their whole children's childhood. And now they're in quarantine and it's awful. But now I'm dealing with the kids that have are still suffering from being, some of the high school kids that were seniors that are struggling, can't go to college. They don't know how to be social, their identity, all the different things that are, the pronouns. I'm like
Oh,
trying
wow.
to understand all that. But explain that, because I really appreciated that chapter, because seeing it firsthand for my girls, and thank God that they had their tools and they knew they had the parents here that were awake, um, and not focusing on knowing what to focus on, I guess.
That's
But
so great. Wow.
tell me your children, tell me your take on what the children went through and what that whole thing is, what you see as the result right now, the
Well,
ramifications.
I think this is a very concerning time for children, in that what's going on in the schools and a lot of the indoctrination that's going on right now is very, very deeply concerning. And I'd be very concerned if I had younger children. I have two grown boys. My youngest is 23 and just graduated college, and my oldest just turned 30. So I would be very, very concerned if I had really young children that were in the school system and hearing about what's being taught to kids today. My neighbor up the street has two kids in one of the top private schools here in LA. Her daughter, who's just a sweet equestrian, normal girl, she's not a pronoun. She gets, they have a transgender spokesperson that comes to the school, and she gets sent home with a sexual questionnaire that is so invasive that was really disturbing to my neighbor. It's like asking her all sorts of questions, like, are you attracted to the same sex? And
Oh,
that I never saw this when my kids were growing up. I never saw any of this. It has changed so radically that it's deeply disturbing. So, the help that you're doing with children, there couldn't be a better time right now to do this, because what I'm seeing is a tremendous manipulation and coercion of trying to confuse children. And I've delved into this area. As I said, I'm a columnist on Daily Clout. I've, interviewed a young woman who is very versed in the whole transgender movement, and she was an innocent girl straight out of, a liberal arts college and wanted to be a doula and, a midwife. And she couldn't believe the brainwashing that was happening there. It's everywhere. That's why mindfulness, again, why I'm so passionate about this, Ashley, is because you have to have eyes wide open right now, like to the likes of which we've never seen before.
Mhm.
And of course, as mothers, our tendency is we want to protect, with mama bears, we're going to protect our children at all costs. I do know, I was telling this story to somebody who told me that there was an incident at one of the private schools here in Los Angeles that a girl came home and said to her mother, "I want you to call me they." And the mother was like, "No, I'm not calling you they." Now, we know this whole narrative of like, God forbid you don't talk, you don't listen to your children, and then what are they going to commit suicide? So there's a lot of fear mongering. The mother stood strong in her position. She said, "I'm not calling you that, I'm calling you by your name." And the girl was like, "No, I'm they, and you have to call me they." And the mother stuck to her position, and it worked.
Hmm.
And the girl got bored with this little game that's going on that these kids are feeling now. If you don't succumb to this type of name pronoun calling, you're an outsider. So there's so much pressure on our kids today, and I feel that it's really incumbent upon every parent today to help children and help parents. Like you said, I mean, if you're doing that and you're helping parents that maybe don't have this information and they need this information, this is a call to action right now. This is serious, serious business. They're indoctrinating children in schools. This is very, very serious. So I don't know your question specifically to that. I'm very concerned about it. I think that there are people, I will say this, there are people that are taking matters in their own hands. They're doing alternate. Now, I know it's not easy to just pull your kid out of school and go, "Okay, I'm going to pull my kid out of
Right.
school and do homeschooling." That sounds great on paper, but how unrealistic can that be for a lot of people? How do you protect your children when they're in these environments today where there's so much of this indoctrination and they're on social media?
Right.
So, I have brought my kids up in a wholesome way, like you have with your kids. I've exposed them to a lot of the things that I subscribe to. And you hope that we've given our children a strong foundation to work with, and
Right.
so they're not influenced by all of these external things that are coming at them 24/7. But this is part of awakening, Ashley. This is about, we have to wake up and be vigilant and see what is happening, because if we don't, it's only going to get worse.
Right. Right. So what do you see? Because you said something, what did you call the star beings, the kids that are being,
I do feel that there are children that are, I mean, I think all children, I think when I think of spirits coming in and inhabiting the bodies that they do, the vessels that they are in for their duration of this life, I think we all come in as these pure beings, these pure spirits, and that, I mean, yes, I could get philosophical about good and evil, and there are a lot of things that happen to people along the way that influences whether they are led by the light or led by the dark. So I do think that there is a generation of children which they need our protection, that children are coming in with a higher vibrational frequency, and I think that they're going to do everything in their power to try to interfere with that. And I think that's what is going on with this entire agenda, whether it's interfering with the pure essence of the children, or it's us becoming more enlightened and more evolved. That's why they're pushing these narratives like transcending our biology and having non-gender, identities, which I think is just a precursor to transhumanism. I do think that if we really stay aligned with our spiritual wisdom, we will bring in our new world. We will bring that in. We will create our new world, and that it could be really unlike anything we've seen before. And I think that's why there's such a polarizing force. You hear about the World Economic Forum wanting to create this new world order. I keep saying that word order is very cringeworthy. they're going to order the world that they want us to adhere to. How about we are creating that? We're creating this new world. So when I talk about star beings, star seed children, I think that there are going to be a lot of children that are going to be very evolved and very awake, and they're going to be aware of this dichotomy that's going on the planet. And
Mhm.
they're children that are going to be spreading, because they're our future. That's why we have
Right,
to protect our children. They're the future. They're going to be our teachers. Do you know?
right.
They're going to lead the way. So it's our job to be the protectors, to be, the gatekeepers of their safety and of their well-being. That's why we have to fight so hard. I see these parents that I know some of them personally from when I was on the board of Children's Health Defense. They're fighting these insidious bills that are trying to be passed in our own, I'm sure you're aware of some of these bills that are trying to be passed that are so evil, of like literally taking children from their homes if an authority or a school figure decides that the parent isn't allowing for them to decide on what gender they want to be.
Mm.
You have to be very, very vigilant and staying awake to what are the bills. I look at the legal people that are fighting it on a legal level. I know some people that are fighting legislation. These are mothers that are going to fight these bills tooth and nail so that they don't get passed. And it is their fight that has thwarted some of these horrible bills that are trying to be passed. And it would be a disaster, a complete disaster for the protection of our children.
Right. Oh, yes. And when you say we live in this world, right? Like we're our world, you and mine, right? And I live in this awakened world. And I tried, and I am aware, obviously, of what's going on and do all my little research. But when I cultivate that in my life and I see the light and I see the love and I come and radiate that, and that's what I radiate with my children and have them radiate the love. And these children that I'm helping, and for an example, this one 14-year-old, her grandmother found me and was realizing her or her son wasn't she needed some guidance. So I start to, I'm not going to push it on a 14-year-old if you're open and willing. It's happened more than this one child, but when you're explaining that, they're so high vibration, but they've been raised by parents that aren't. So that has been suppressed. And so when I get them on this Zoom call and I start to open up their eyes and I'm pulling the light out,
Oh,
they are it gives me goosebumps now, but they're there. They're like hungry. Everything that I offer and tell them, and they just get lit up. And I just get so excited and I'm like, oh, I just want the world to see these children are hungry for this love and for this, this next level of living. They're already there, but they've been suppressed by the parents that are sleepwalking.
exactly. That's such important work to be doing right now if you're working in that capacity, because there's so much pressure on kids today, and then a lot of them don't want to go along with these programs and these narratives, but they're too afraid to stand up to it. And I think if more children start to recognize, it's like that girl that gave up once her mother didn't want to play the game with her and call her a they, the daughter got bored with the game. So I think that we need to midwife these kids. We really do. We need to usher in their protection and to be able to let them feel like it's okay for them to not agree to these narratives that are brainwashing maybe their peers at school.
Right.
It takes a lot of courage. So by giving them permission to do that, Ashley, I think is so important. I think they need this now more than ever.
Oh, I agree. Oh, it's been so fun. Oh, Aura, this hour went by so fast. I just think you're amazing. I love you. I am so honored to have been able to even have this conversation. I could go so many more hours in this, but is there,
Thank
with
you.
this book, what would be, before we get into finding you, what would be one thing like that you would want people, like, why would you want someone to read this book? Like, what would be something that we haven't touched on that would be something that, like, what is your why? on
I,
writing that.
you know, for people to to awaken. And even if you are awake, to awaken even more. Like
Yeah,
what an incredible journey to be on, the journey of awakening.
right. I love it. And we can find you on your website.
Yeah, oranadrich.com is my website. And then if you want to order my recent book or look into any of the books that resonate for you, it's Amazon is obviously the fastest way to get them.
Right. Oh, thank you so much, Aura. It's
Thank
been such
you,
a pleasure.
Ashley. So wonderful to connect with you. And I love hearing about the work that you're doing too.
Thank you.